Are you curious about bodies, pleasure, and possibilities? And what about curious about what others are up to on the planet when it comes to pleasure, sex, and play? Have you considered what pleasure can do for your life, your body, and your bank account? Do you know something magical, delightful, and out of this world orgasmic is not only possible for you, but totally available to you? If you're ready to be the magical, sexual, sexy beast you know you can be, and you just need the tools to get there, you're in the right place. Now, here's the host of The Pleasure Zone, sensual movement artist, relationship and sex alchemist, Milica Jelenic.
Hello, my sweet pleasure seekers. This is an amazing and incredible day for me. I can tell you that looking back 10 years ago, I would not have thought that I would be having a 10th anniversary celebration of the Pleasure Zone. It kind of boggles my mind. Even on my 5th anniversary, I was like, holy cow, I did 5 years of shows. And at that point, I was even like, what are the chances I'll have a 10-year anniversary? And right now I'm sitting here thinking, what are the chances I'll have a 15-year anniversary? Come on, who has content for that long? Like the Love Boat was only on for 9 years. Like I've done more episodes than the Love Boat, guys. Like what? I have not done more episodes than Star Trek. So that is a target I'm aiming for. More episodes than Star Trek. I mean, all the Star Treks. So we're talking hundreds. That's like thousands of episodes. If you're a Trekkie and a nerd like me, you'll understand that's a lot of episodes of all the Star Treks and the movies. All right. So 10th anniversary, what does that even mean? Like, why is it significant? I actually don't even know what it is in terms of like, is it a paper anniversary? Is it a whatever anniversary? It's funny that I don't know. I celebrated 10 years with my husband a year ago. We actually celebrate both our wedding anniversary, sort of, but we more celebrate our first date. And our first date anniversary was in June 8th, 2013. 2023 was our 10th anniversary of 2013. So fun stuff. And what on earth do you do on a 10th anniversary show? Well, we celebrate, guys. And what are we celebrating? We're going to celebrate my favorite episodes. If you have favorite episodes, I would love to hear you chime in on what your favorite episodes are. Now, the last 10 years, some of you have actually written in to chat with me about it. And I have had amazing emails over the years, super grateful. And some of them, if you feel like you've written to me and I haven't responded, write back to me. Sometimes things get lost in my in transition, in like transfer, and I love writing back to you guys. So absolutely feel free to send me emails. You can go through my website, milicajelenic.com. That's MILICAJELENIC, exactly how it doesn't sound. Milica Jelenic. All right. So over the last 10 years, guys, not only have the episodes become more interesting, I think they've changed a lot. So for those of you who are brand new to this show, and this is your very first episode, and you're like, what, 10th anniversary? What was the content before? Well, for the last 10 years, not only have I grown as a person, my education has, been more extensive. I've added to the roster. I've learned a lot. I've done a lot. And so that's added to the content as well. So in the very beginning, when I started my show, I have to tell you, my very first episode, I was freaking out. So my first episode had no video. So for those of you who are used to my show just being audio, it does have video now, for those of you who didn't know that. And so it was just audio. And I recorded it from my friend's salon in Toronto. And I didn't know anything about sound. I had like a really bad mic. But it worked. I didn't really, and I was given all the information I needed, but I was just flabbergasted, dumbfounded, and didn't actually know what to do. Now, if you go back and listen to that first episode and think that, hey, that was pretty good, thank you. I was sweating it the whole time. It was also July. I was literally sweating it. It was hot in Toronto. I don't remember there being that much air conditioning in the salon at the time. It was 8 o'clock at night. The sun was coming down. It was dark out. And I'm trying to like figure out how to work this. I remember actually sitting on the floor doing my first podcast. And I don't recommend this, guys. This was not comfortable, nor the best position, nor the most relaxing thing to do if you are starting a podcast. And if you are starting a podcast, come over to Inspired Choices Network, because they take care of all the things that I have no idea. I love when people ask me, what do you do for your podcast? I'm like, I show up because I have producers and I have a team that actually does all the good stuff for me that I do not know how to do, nor do I desire learning how to do. I'd rather work with you guys on having more pleasure and having happier bodies. So first episode, what a crazy day. Sweating, crying. And the funniest thing was my producer at the time knew, so we weren't on video, keep this in mind, knew that I was stressed, said, your voice sounds fine, but I can hear you're not smiling. I'm like, how can you hear when somebody's not smiling? But now when I actually listen to audios, I too can hear when people aren't smiling. I love listening to audiobooks. I love listening to all kinds of things. I'm a big listener, and I can now hear too when people aren't smiling. It's so weird. So you might even notice when I talk, if I'm smiling and you're seeing it visually, the tonation and everything is a little different. And then if I'm not smiling, then the voice gets a little different as well. So it's very fascinating to me what I've learned both about presentation, about conversation, about how to present the material. So in the very beginning, I pretty much just channeled anything and everything that was coming through. I didn't really have any background or research. And about 2 or 3 years in, I was like, if I'm going to keep doing this, I'm going to need to get myself certified. So then I went on to get a certification for sex and intimacy coaching. I have a lot of certifications, guys. If I put them all on my wall, it would look like wallpaper and it would look weird. So I don't do that. They're there, they exist. So I got my certification for that, certification for relationship coaching, certification in a bunch of things that are sex and intimacy related, somatic body worker in something called the mitzvah technique, as well as I do a lot of different types of healing work. So the work I do is really a conglomeration of all of that. And not everybody needs all of it. So it's whatever your needs are, but I work within that. So when I first started, it was definitely a stressful moment for me. And I had created my own show out of the prompting from the CEO of Inspired Choices Network, who had heard me as a guest on somebody else's show. And at first, I kind of knew her, but I kind of didn't. Like, we had met, but we didn't really know each other that much. And I had been invited as a guest to be on somebody else's show. And I was invited on because, and I don't know if I've told this story to you guys before, but I was having lunch with some friends at an event, and a friend of mine was talking about some of the struggles she was going through in her relationship. And I said, well, if your partner has erectile dysfunction and you're still looking to like have pleasure with them, there's lots of other things you can do. You don't have to have penetrative sex. There's like a whole world that you can explore. And I was like, why don't you start with oral sex? And she's like, it hurts my neck to give blowjobs. And I was like, oh, that's an easy fix. So I gave her the lowdown on how you can, give blowjobs, because she was like, and I can't get on my knees because my knees hurt. I'm like, we're going to set you up. You got to get this stool. You can get in this position. You're going to do this, and and it's not about giving an orgasm. It's all about full pleasure and just being present with the person's body and enjoying each other, blah, blah, blah. So that was like an eye opener for her, but also an eye opener for the lady that we were having dinner with, who happened to have a podcast. It happened to have a radio show. At the time, we were calling them just radio shows. So happened to have a radio show and invited me on as a guest to talk about fellatio, the proper word for blowjobs. So we had an hour of conversation about not just fellatio, but my take on prostitution as a gift. I just have a very different perspective on sex. I did not know that I had a different perspective on sex and bodies until it was pointed out to me. I actually truly thought, doesn't everybody think like I do? Like, I thought this was just a common way to be and think, and apparently not. So sometimes, guys, the things you think are the most natural and like, yeah, that's a no-brainer, are sometimes your greatest genius and one of the greatest gifts you can offer to the planet. So what happened after that first episode, with that being a guest, was that I was on, the person who's now the CEO of Inspired Choices Network, Christine McIver, had produced that show. She was producing and didn't own the network. And she called me up and she's like, okay, that was brilliant. You are a genius when it comes to talking about sex. And I was like, oh, you're just blowing smoke up my butt. But then I found out later, she doesn't call every single person who's a guest and like get them to be having a show. I just thought she was blowing smoke up my butt. And I was like, yeah, whatever. I don't even know. I was like, I'll try 8 episodes and see what kind of content I can come up with. And I was stressed about creating 8 episodes. Guys, I thought I had nothing to say about sex. I thought that I just talked about blowjobs. That's all I had. That's all I had under my belt. So after that, I was like, I got to find guests and experts who actually know about sex, who actually know things. And then as I was hear them talk, I was like, well, I knew that. This wasn't brand new news, but I have to say my very first guest was a lady, Leah, and I'm still friends with her on Facebook. I'm in a group of hers, and her trajectory of what she works with is now different. But she used to work hands-on with people for sex and aging, and I thought that was one of the most interesting careers I'd ever heard of, that somebody actually got to do like somatic sexual body work on people, healing work, sexual healing work. Like, I knew that sexual healing happened, but I didn't know that you could have it as a career choice. And so that was like, bing, that's an eye opener. Wow, there are really unique people in the world who have really unique ways of being. And so I had a lot of guests in the beginning because I actually did not, it took me a while to get that I actually had knowledge and background and information that was a contribution that would bring a different side or a different insight to you guys, right? So that very first guest, that was fun. And she was so open about talking that I realized, oh, so you know what? There's probably more people out there that are really open about talking. I mention her because as the first guest, it kind of sticks in my mind. I had another group, either she was my first or second guest, but she was memorable for sure because it was such a unique topic about sex and aging, and the importance she felt about discussing sex and aging. And now 10 years later, we've aged. So, it's even more relevant to the conversation. And I just think about too, some of the actual favorite episodes I've had are not the ones that have had the best listens, which you would think maybe they should go in tandem. But over the years, I've had some pretty incredible guests who have gone through a lot of different things. And I have a reoccurring guest who's been on almost every year for the last, or every year, every 2 years for the last 10 years. So Guy Morissette, if you guys haven't listened to, we didn't have video. And so her wisdom and knowledge and her expertise in BDSM is absolutely incredible. And the things that she has shared, and I've taken courses with her about bodies and being able to actually heal bodies with BDSM, and also being able to, when she first started her work, she was a BDSM life coach. And then she's kind of switched it over. She doesn't really do it as life coaching anymore. She's a pro dom. And so it's really fun to watch as my guests have evolved, as I have them back and get to talk with them. There are some guests that were really tricky to have on, and I'm not going to name them because I don't want to bash them, but probably if you've listened to all the episodes, you may have heard conversations that were kind of one-sided, or that were completely, like, the person didn't show up on time. They might have shown up like an hour late, or almost that, or not had their sound on and didn't follow any of the instructions. So it was really stressful to have them on. That happened a handful of times. But the really great guests are the ones that I've had some of the best conversations with, conversations that we don't necessarily expect to have about sex. So we're going to talk about them when we come back from this commercial break. Some of my favorite guests right after this commercial here on Inspired Choices Network.
Are you secretly a voyeur, wondering what's going on in other people's sex lives? What if now is the time for a totally different sexual evolution? Are you interested in people who are pioneers of different sexual and pleasurable practices? Lean in now with Milica Jelenic, where she will entice you and your body to know your own pleasure zone. On the Pleasure Zone radio show with sensual movement artist Milica Jelenic, you'll receive tools, inspiration, and a foundation to allow yourself to receive more in your sex life, and quite possibly other areas of your life as well. Listen for the Pleasure Zone with Milica every Monday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, 7 p.m. Central Time, 6 p.m. Mountain Time, and 5 p.m. Pacific Time on InspiredChoicesNetwork.com.
Are you a subject matter expert? Are you here to share your expertise with an audience waiting to hear from you in only the way you can deliver? Are you ready to have your voice amplified across the airwaves? Inspired Choices Network has a global radio platform streaming to millions of people across the world. Professionally produced and supported by an accomplished team every step of the way, you can broadcast from anywhere in the world, knowing your voice matters, and we ensure it is delivered with ease and efficiency. Eager to hear your message, the world awaits. Contact us today to become an Inspired Choices Network radio host. Email become a host at InspiredChoicesNetwork.com.
This is the Pleasure Zone with sensual movement artist Milica Jelenic. To participate in the program today, join our live studio audience in our chat room at InspiredChoicesNetwork.com. You can also make the choice to ask or comment by email, info@MilicaJelenic.com. Now, back to the program.
Welcome back, my sweet pleasure seekers. So for those of you who are just joining me now, we are having a fun conversation all about the 10th anniversary of this show. So if you are brand new, go back and have listens. There are, guys, topics I have talked about and forgot about. There are probably topics, actually one of the strangest topics I probably ever talked about, and I had 3 people contact me about one episode I did once about 8 years ago on sex and entities, and it was for Halloween, and it was like how you can enjoy sex with ghosts. And I cannot tell you how funny it is that I was offered to go on an interview in England to discuss sex with entities, and I had to let them know, like, this is not my whole shtick. Yes, it's possible, and I can explain to you what I'm aware of with that, and I could explain to people if this is something that they would like to do, how you can do this in a safe way energetically. Yes, however, this is not all of me, so I didn't want to be represented as the girl who has sex with ghosts, because I haven't done that in a long time, but I have done that in my life. That I feel I have done that in my life, and I have no proof of it other than it was experiential. So those episodes, the ones that got me, the interesting ones that got me the most feedback, I got asked to do an interview in England, asked to do an interview in the US on sex with ghosts, asked to write an article about it, I believe. I remember there were 3 contacts for that. And it was just strange and interesting. And years later, like we're talking, I did that episode, say 8 years ago or so. And I even till 2 years ago was still getting people responding about it. So it wasn't just that I was being offered interviews and things. I was also, and I didn't take people up on them. Again, I didn't want to be seen as the expert in sex with ghosts. That's not my expertise in any way, and it's not my like thing. It's just possible. To me, it's possible. So you can argue otherwise. That's fine. So I had a lot of people write about that to me too, saying what they'd experienced. And so over the years, if I were to gather intel and write a book on people's experiences and what they've written to me, I think it would be a most fascinating book. It would be like a book that contained information on, so the top emails I get are people who have really enjoyed certain episodes that are kink related. So whether it's sex with ghosts, that's kink related. And so we're talking ghosts, not necrophilia, not dead people. We're talking the energetic being souls. And then the other top listen, especially on YouTube, because some of the other platforms don't really give us accurate numbers for downloads and listens. The other top listen is a show I did, I think 9 years ago, called Golden Showers Bring May Flowers. And I have had some of the sweetest, loveliest emails about that episode. People opening their hearts to me, people just being grateful that I had the conversation about that, feeling like they weren't, weird, helping to show some other perspectives on it. And so that show led to other shows about urologia, which is the kink for water play. We'll call it water play, water sports, the kink for urologia. And that's the proper name. And then water sports in the kink world. So over the years, I've given other titles and done episodes and looked at different perspectives of it. And all of those episodes, every single one that involves urine, top listen, top view on YouTube. Hands down, my top views. So guys, if you are listening, and I would love to hear what your top favorites are. Would you like more content in the next upcoming year, 2 years, 10 years that is more kink based, and conversations about how to get into specific kinks? If you do have specific kinks that you would like me to talk about, let me know. And one of my other favorite episodes I did, which has had pretty good downloads and views, is one on specifically on belly button play, which was recommended and asked for by a viewer. And so I love getting viewer response and viewer feedback on different topics about what people would like to listen to. And then I've had emails from people who are just like, I love all your shows, all your content just makes me happy. I'm like, guys, this is why I do it. And I love the feedback, and it keeps me going for sure. So I love that I can contribute to you guys and give you content that you enjoy. And I might be mentioning some episodes here that even if you are an avid listener, you didn't even know about, like maybe you never knew about the strange ghost episode I did. And, and then I think I'm not going to sidetrack on that. There's actually a show from England called Ghosts, and then they did a remake in the US, and there's some pretty hot ghosts on the ghost show. One that I can think of, he's like the poet. But if I was going to be doing a ghost, I would think I would want to do a hot ghost. I'm just saying. So there's that. I've talked about like the history of vibrators. Actually, I really love doing episodes that involve doing research on historical things. So looking into like how far back does it go that people have had not just vibrators, but dildos and sex toys, and what is the history of sex toys? I love it. I was actually doing research on that way before I even had the pleasure zone. So I was doing research on that in my 20s. And even when I was in university, I had this kind of, so I studied psychology. I just have a BA in psych. I didn't go further on that. But in my BA, anytime that I could take a course that was geared towards sex and sexuality, I took it. I was taking everything I could, sex and sexuality related, to make university more fun. Some people were doing things on addictions. I was like, well, I want to learn about human sexuality. And I could tell you that when I did that almost 30 years ago, oh my gosh, it is 30 years. When I started university 30 years ago, I would not have considered that this would be the thing that I would be talking about in my life. I mean, I admired Sue Johansson, who was a Canadian. She was a nurse and she was a sexologist and famous for talking about sex. Always admired her. Never thought I would be a version of like what she did. And so being able to bring education and information just brings me so much joy, and being able to do the research. And it's always interesting because new research emerges all the time. You know, you have archaeologists going in and finding things, and then the dating of things sometimes changes, right? So one of the first episodes I did about the history of sex toys, most of the information was coming from European archaeological digs where they had kind of ignored anything from Asia, which then more information kind of came out of the depths years later to say, hey, wait a second, we're being really Eurocentric with all of our research here. And the reality is we've got, you know, dildos like predating those European dildos. We've got ones dating back even thousands of years before that in different parts of Asia. So it's really fun because, you know, you go and I could do an episode one year, and then there'll, even with things around health, things change all the time. So even when I do an episode, sometimes I could come back a year or two later and there's more information to share on the same topic. So if you have ever watched my shows and you're like, oh, I already listened to her episode on that, I guarantee you no episodes are the same ever. Even if it's the same topic, I have brought, I've either studied something else, experienced something else, and I'm bringing new information to the table. The things that I do repeat are that consent is important, communication is important, curiosity is important, and what those things mean to me. Those are like my three main C's. We all like our C words, right? So those episodes that have the most listens honestly were the biggest surprises to me. When I started getting downloads and hits and views on Golden Showers, Bring May Flowers, I didn't even know how to, I was like, really? This is okay. I was beyond surprised, especially because my content is on pretty vanilla platforms, right? I don't have my content on FetLife. I don't have my content on different streaming services that would be geared towards kink and sex specifically. So the fact that people were finding me on YouTube for that was like phenomenal. And thank you for all the listens. It's one of my top listened to shows over the decades. And I'd love to hear some of my other shows that I felt were like actually really good content, but don't have as many hits. And some of them have more to do with healing. And I get that some people are like, guys, if you listen to them, sometimes what happens is you actually it's like having a session with me for free. So if you're looking at episodes around things like healing trauma, I will give you tips and tools in those in order to start to begin your own healing journey. And also in those episodes, what you can find is that, you know, I'll give you how you can contact me. And like I've said time and again, and I love it when people take me up on this. And I just had somebody last week take me up on it, that I offer you 15 minutes for free. So all you got to do is connect with me and I'll send you a conversation connection link so that you can book a time with me. And I'm happy to do so. Yes, I am busy, and yes, I have time for you. So if you are willing to have and put the effort into booking that appointment and showing up, I'm happy to contribute to you. So some of the things that I have to say that have not worked for me over the years was when I had a website that had my phone number on it, and I was getting contacted by people at like midnight and with all kinds of sexual fantasies that they were trying to, pull off, and then they were being super rude to me when I'd say, you know what, this is not appropriate. They're like, well, I thought you were into this and blah, blah, blah. I was like, never did I say that because I talk about sex, am I open to you, calling me and harassing me sexually, verbally over the phone. Never said I was open to that. So what it has done, though, is help me get really clear on my boundaries. If you do want to talk to me, you do need to book time. We go on video. I do not give you my phone number anymore. You can't access that anymore. So that for a while, I had a few people who were kind of harassing, and it was not pleasant. And but the people who are not harassing and send me lovely letters, and I get to chat with about great things like flowers, that makes me happy. So there are, over the years, the content has really changed, guys. So if you're seeing this and you're like, well, I used to listen and I haven't listened in a while, go back and listen to the last couple of years, because my content truly has changed. I was, at the time when I first started this show, in an organization where we were doing healing work in a sort of certain way, and I brought a lot of that to the table, and things have changed a lot. And I'm looking at it more, I love looking at it from more of a research-based perspective. Also, still channeling, but not to the I'm bringing me. I don't have script. Like, I don't have a script for you guys right now. So in a way, it's still channeled, but it's not the way that it was before. It's that I have more knowledge that I can tap into and give you things like facts and numbers and dates and things that are there because I've learned what they are. I didn't have to feel them out. I was like, oh, I know this. Let me see what backs this. So I've backed my knowing with whatever research I could find. So the last break, I mentioned that I will talk about my favorite guests, and sorry that I didn't, guys. I will after this next break. I was just tantalizing you to come back. So we're going to talk about my favorite guests. I did talk about a few for sure, but I have more. So stay tuned. You're listening to The Pleasure Zone here on Inspired Choices Network, and we'll be right back after this commercial.
Are you secretly a voyeur, wondering what's going on in other people's sex lives? What if now is the time for a totally different sexual evolution? Are you interested in people who are pioneers of different sexual and pleasurable practices? Lean in now with Milica Jelenic, where she will entice you and your body to know your own pleasure zone. On the Pleasure Zone radio show with sensual movement artist Milica Jelenic, you'll receive tools, inspiration, and a foundation to allow yourself to receive more in your sex life, and quite possibly other areas of your life as well. Listen for The Pleasure Zone with Milica every Monday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, 7 p.m. Central Time, 6 p.m. Mountain Time, and 5 p.m. Pacific Time on InspiredChoicesNetwork.com.
Interested in masturbating for money, copulating for consciousness, and pleasuring on purpose? 21 Days of Sexual Magicism with sensual movement artist Milica Jelenic is an exploration of tools, processes, and actions that you can use to create more for your life, your body, your money inflows, and so much more. Graduated learning for all levels of interest. Learn at your own pace via video classes or join the yearly live class. Take a peek at www.milicajelenic.com.
How wonderful would it be to carry your favorite Inspired Choices Network host with you throughout your day? Well, now you can. Inspired Choices Network now has its very own mobile app. Our free app offers live streaming shows, along with thousands of podcasts and TV episodes. Our shows cover a wide variety of topics. Whether you're waking up with us, carrying us through the day, and taking us to bed with you, we're always here for you to enjoy. We're easy to find. Just search for Inspired Choices Network in the Apple App Store or Google Play Store.
This is The Pleasure Zone with sensual movement artist Milica Jelenic. To participate in the program today, join our live studio audience in our chat room at InspiredChoicesNetwork.com. You can also make the choice to ask or comment by email. info@milicajelenic.com. Now, back to the program.
Welcome back, my sweet pleasure seekers. For those of you who are tuning in, I want to thank you for tuning into the 10th anniversary show. Guys, you know what that means? That I have well over 400 episodes of audio. I have well over 200, I think, episodes of video. I don't even know anymore. And it is freaking exciting to me that I have been able to bring content for the last 10 years to show up and to show up more and more every time, as well as to be able to learn for the fun of learning. And you know what it's done for me? Looking back, what I actually think is, if I had set it up as, you know what, I'm creating this show so that I can create a PhD in sexology, become have a PhD in sex and sexuality, I probably would have kept every single reference material that I had ever found and all the books and all the quotes I've ever done. And I would have compiled it and given it to my friends who have PhDs and asked them to help me create a PhD. Well, I would have had to go for my master's first, but I would have actually done that on purpose. But you know what? When I first started, I had no idea that I was going to be doing this for more than, honestly, I didn't think I was going to make it past 2 months. So the fact that I made it 10 years is mind-boggling. And the fact that my husband has stayed with me through all of my episodes of things that I've said, the good thing is he's not an avid listener of my show in a way. He already knows my life and he already knows what I research. But I'm so grateful that he's the guy who is like, yeah, this is what my wife does. And he's really cool about it. And sometimes he'll even randomly say to people that my wife is in the how does he word it? He makes it sound like I'm a whore, but I'm not, which makes me laugh even more. She's a sex worker, something like that. And when he really wants a good laugh, he'll say that to people. So I'm in the sex industry, though, for sure, as a sex educator and sex and intimacy coach and relationship coach. So favorite guests of all times are probably the ones you wouldn't be expecting. I have a friend named Matthew Brackett who I interviewed last June for the first time, and then I interviewed him later on in December about the gift of love. But the first episode, we talked about reconciling faith and sex. And I think it's a fantastic episode. It, I think, is one of the most underrated, under-listened to episodes. And guys, even if you don't think of yourself as religious, I think you're going to probably really enjoy and get something taken away from his take on sex and spirituality and religion. As you know, he was a former priest. He left the priesthood because he decided that he actually wanted relationships. So a relationship. So he left it for his own volition and all of that. And so I think that one is under listened to, should be listened to more. And in the last year, I've had some really great guests. I've had ones that have brought a lot of eye-opening information to the table, like a recent guest that I had in June named Jeremy Rodruck. He's been on more than once, but he always brings great content to the table as well to share with you guys about relationships and how to connect with your partner and how to connect with yourself and your partner and how to grow up and be like playful and mature at the same time. So his content is fabulous. I've also had other people who are hosts be on the show as well. And I've had several hosts on my show over the years. Some of them are no longer hosts, but I've had quite a few. We've had content even that is talking about things like how to sexify your room. And we had content. So there was a content creator on here named Lisa Bennett, who did a lot of things with basically feng shui. And we talked about how you can use feng shui to increase your sex life and sexify your life. So that was fun. And so that episode's still out there too. So, and I think I was on her show as well. So that episode might still be out there. So there's been, like, guys, honestly, the content has just been so all over the place with everything you can imagine, sex and sex related. And it amazes me even to this day that I still can come up with something that's new that I haven't talked about. So, and sometimes I do go back to old content because I've found new information that I can share with you guys. So I've had great conversations with some other hosts like Lizzie Enns, who has the Lizzie Enns show. And Lizzie is an Amish renegade, and she wrote the book Amish Renegade as well. And she is a board certified nutritionist who we actually work together with some of our clients, so we can work with them on health. And the content on her shows is phenomenal, and she brought a lot of great content to the episode that she had with me as well. So in the last couple of years too, I've done a lot of episodes that are geared towards healing trauma. And one of the reasons is because in my life, I have experienced sexual trauma more than once. And it actually took me a while to realize that I'd had sexual traumas that I kind of had ignored, and sexual assaults that I had ignored, and I just like brushed it off to, well, I didn't say no, so did it count? It's sticky, like my body still responded to it like it was violence. And the ones where I did say no and it's still stuff happened. So it was really important to me to look at what I can offer for that, because for me, one of the most important things in getting to pleasure is to be able to know how to manage our responses to triggers that are generally come up from excessive stress or trauma. So if something's triggering you and then it's turning you off, then it's turning not just your sex drive off, but it's also going to turn off your creativity. It's going to turn off your energetic flows in general. So it'll turn off your money flows, it'll turn off your health, it'll turn off your joy. So me getting down to the nitty-gritty of healing trauma is so important. And I have had several people come on and talk about that. And actually, we had a really great conversation last year last year or the year before, with Gaia Morissette talking about using BDSM for trauma healing. And she has a fabulous course on that. I don't know if it's only for practitioners or not, because as I am a practitioner, I am in her course, but it might be available to others as well. So those are some of my favorites. And I've had some guests too that are surprising and didn't necessarily, they were memorable. We'll put it that way. I had a guest that was really memorable. I think his episode is still up. It's hard to say. There was a lot of swearing in it. So the episode was with a fellow named Alex May. I think at some point we swore the entire alphabet out, and it was a fun conversation. It's all on audio. That one was not on video. And if that content is still available, I had interviewed Alex because he had been a male sex worker in his life. And so I really wanted to interview people who had experienced this. Like, I knew my perspective on how much I think the value is for sex workers, what they offer the world. But I also wanted to interview people who had gone through it and lived it, and what they'd gone through. So I don't know if he still does that or not. I am still randomly in contact with him on social media, but so that was a very abstract conversation. I don't think we got a lot of listens on that one, but if you've ever wanted to hear from an actual sex worker what their experience was, you'll get that from Alex on that show. I also interviewed some people who were strippers, and I don't know if I pointed that out on the episode or not, pole dancing and stripping. And also I interviewed a woman who, and I don't know if I can even say this anymore because I don't know if she still does this work, but she was a professional escort, and I had a few episodes with her. So some of them didn't reveal that was their career choices. as there are legalities around those choices. So I don't want to name them and get them in trouble, but there's been a lot of interesting content, guys. And so I would love to hear from you. If you have been an avid listener, what are your favorite episodes? What are some episodes you would like to hear? Like, what topics are interesting to you that you would like to hear? Maybe there are topics I've talked about and you'd like more information on them because maybe I didn't give enough, or I get that, and let me know. And there are also, if you are new and you're just looking through stuff, see which ones jump at you. It's always interesting to me to hear from new listeners what kind of rabbit hole they fall down when they start to get in my content. They're like, well, I listened to this episode on this, and then it led me to this, and then it made me think of this one, and then they get down a rabbit hole, and then they like, oh wow, I listened to this episode too. And it's always fun to hear those trains of rabbit hole thoughts. I think one of the most fun things that showed up with this show was about 4 or 5 years ago, and I ended up having this person on my show as well as a guest, as she was looking at getting into sex and intimacy coaching as well. She ended up changing gears, and she works in DEI, or did work in DEI for a really big company. So the content with her, she ended up being on my show because I had been introduced to her from some friends of hers, and they had contacted me to do a session with her. And I started talking with her, and I said, oh, you know what? You could listen to my episode on such and such and such and such. This could really help. So she got into her Spotify, and she was scrolling through her Spotify, and she's like, I have you on my listens list. You're like the top recommended for this topic. I was like, I had no idea. So that was like she's like, you're famous. I'm like, I didn't even know. So it's really fun for me when I get to like meet people who think I'm famous. I think it's hilarious. I'm not really, but when they've listened to content, I've also had times where, which is even funnier to me, where my dad's like, my friends at church found you on TV. What are you talking about? I'm like, Dad, you know I talk about sex in this. He's like, I can't watch you talk about sex. I'm like, I understand that. I don't get naked. I'm talking about like healing and like things we need to know and relationships. He's like, okay, you're doing good stuff. I don't need to watch you. I'm like, no, you don't. And it's awkward and great to me that your friends are watching. I hope it's helping. But it's also very funny and strange. But thank you to the Serbian church listeners who are out there listening. So we're going to head to our next commercial break. You're listening to The Pleasure Zone here on Inspired Choices Network, and we'll be right back after this commercial.
Are you secretly a voyeur, wondering what's going on in other people's sex lives? What if now is the time for a totally different sexual evolution? Are you interested in people who are pioneers of different sexual and pleasurable practices? Lean in now with Milica Jelenic, where she will entice you and your body to know your own pleasure zone. On the Pleasure Zone radio show with sensual movement artist Milica Jelenic, you'll receive tools, inspiration, and a foundation to allow yourself to receive more in your sex life, and quite possibly other areas of your life as well. Listen for the Pleasure Zone with Milica every Monday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, 7 p.m. Central Time, 6 p.m. Mountain Time, and 5 p.m. Pacific Time on InspiredChoicesNetwork.com. This is the Pleasure Zone with sensual movement artist Milica Jelenic. To participate in the program today, join our live studio audience in our chat room at InspiredChoicesNetwork.com. You could also make the choice to ask or comment by email, info@MilicaJelenic.com. Now, back to the program.
Welcome back, my sweet pleasure seekers. We are rounding up the 10th anniversary show, and I've mentioned some of my favorite guests that I've had. I've had some really cool people on over the years. I want to mention one of the ones that I think had the most unique career choice, as they're the only person to date that I've met that actually has this career. So at one point I interviewed a lady who is a masturbation coach. And I have to date not met anybody else who does that for a living. And she is qualified, certified as a masturbation coach. So she took certification. It was like an intensive training. And I remember that episode so well. I thought it was really unique in that I didn't know people didn't know how to masturbate, but she brought up some really good points around traumas and religious traumas and different things where you've been told that it's not okay. So you haven't even gone into self-discovery. And to me, self-discovery is so important. If you don't know what you like, how are you supposed to tell your lover what you like? I mean, yes, you can play and you can figure it out, but it's really helpful. It's like if you know the recipe and you know what recipe works for you, and you can just be like, hey, this recipe works. Let's have some fun now. You can add to that recipe and zazz it up and jazz it up. But if you know some basics that work for you, it's really helpful, rather than maybe getting in awkward, stuff. So I thought that was a really, really cool career choice. And she hasn't been on for years. So I wonder what she's up to. She was at the time, I think she was in her 50s. So I hope she's still alive if she's listening. And then I've had people on who you wouldn't even think of as coaches for anything to do with intimacy and sex. And there's a lady that was on at least, I think she was on at least once. Natalie Krishna is her name. And she is actually, I think she's a podiatrist, like she's a foot specialist, orthopedist with orthopedics. She works something in that in health. And so I had her on because we were talking about beauty. And one of the things that she had done in her life in order to heal her body and her finances was having some really deep conversations with her body. And those deep conversations helped her to heal on so many levels. And she was just fascinating and fun to watch. Absolutely beautiful to look at as well. Those episodes are not on video, unfortunately, because she is really lovely to look at. And her voice is great too. So go listen to the episodes with Natalie Krishna. And there were other episodes too that were maybe a little deeper, darker, that some of them I did solo, that talked about some really hard conversations around, like, how do you have conversations with your partner around whether, if you've had trauma in your life, and how do you deal with that and navigate that, and how do you move past it? How do you have pleasure? Some of those deeper, harder conversations, we don't always know how to get them started, right? So having some tips and tools on that is, I find, always helpful. And yeah, so what are some of my other, I think, favorite episodes, favorite topics? I have to say that my favorite topics really are talking about trauma and finding different ways to relieve trauma in order to have pleasure. But also some of my other favorite topics are discovering new kinks that I did not know existed and talking about them. So over the last couple of years, I didn't even realize how many kinks there were. And then at one point I went, if it exists, there's a kink for it. And so then I started to go, oh, okay, if there's a kink for everything, what if there's a kink for this and a kink for that and a kink for that? And I started looking them up and started to see there's different communities for these different kinks. And it's really cool that I think sometimes what people need the most is to feel like they belong in community. And it's actually one of the methods to help your body come to, like in the polyvagal response system, to be able to feel calm, is to have a feeling and connection to a community. So if you happen to be in a kink community and you guys are all into the same thing, like sniffing flowers, that is so cool. It will help your body heal. Be in community with people who you have something in common with is great. I have to say, one of my other greatest listen episodes that I've ever had, well, consistently with this particular topic, spanking. Spanking is top-notch listens. And if I had the kind of show where I could actually do demonstrations, I think I tried to demonstrate on myself on one show, but it was a bit tricky. And my husband refuses to go on camera, so I can't get him to bend over and take it, or have me bend over and him spank me. So that wasn't happening. But it's a favorite topic of mine because I find it to be really healing to be spanked. So when you are able to be in the driver's seat of that, it can be a real life game changer. So many great episodes over the years, guys. I can't even tell you.
Thank you for
I've loved
listening
it,
to
and I
The
hope you
Pleasure
have
Zone
too.
with sensual movement artist Milica Jelenic. The Pleasure Zone returns next Monday at 8 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Central, 6 p.m. Mountain, and 5 p.m. Pacific on InspiredChoicesNetwork.com. We hope you'll join us. Until then, have the best week of your life by choosing to be turned on and tuned in to your body.